The Russian economy teetered toward collapse as international sanctions set in. More than $600 billion of Russia's reserves were frozen after Russia declared war on Ukraine in February 2022. This was one of the most dramatic financial locks in history, paralyzing the country's economic defenses. As per the International Monetary Fund (IMF) report, these sanctions hit the Russian economy directly, and it said that this move of economic battlefield catapulted Russia into deep financial crisis. The sanctions zeroed in on Russia's offshore-held central bank reserves to effectively freeze the country out of a major chunk of its funds. This immediate stop came crashing down on Russia, and the resulting economic decay dropped it immediately to a position where it was unable to support the ruble and inflation. This Financial Times, Western countries led by the US and EU jointly launched this round of sanctions. The Russian economy has a heavy protection. According to the outlet, Russia's foreign reserves have been frozen, prohibiting the central bank from fully supporting the ruble and, hence, the currency has plummeted. This bold move, unprecedented in Franco-Germany history, demonstrated true solidarity among the civilized international community to thwart the Russian military offensives. Russia had built up foreign reserves before the invasion as a cushion against potential economic sanctions. Yet the size and pace of the Western reaction caught the Kremlin off guard. But the situation in Ukraine has underscored a miscalculation by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who did not anticipate the West would come together so quickly and decisively, according to Bloomberg's analysis. This financial lockdown not only paralyzed what was thought to be a large segment of Russia's war funding, but also triggered another blast wave on the markets. The central bank could hardly close the stock market for weeks to avoid a massive flight of capital, and the decline in the ruble exchange rate went so fast that bans were immediately imposed and became fakes. The only part of the sanctions, doing it all together at once, was devastating to Russia, freezing its financial assets, destabilizing its currency routes, and exposing the inherent weaknesses within its economic planning. The combined pressure of the international community had reduced Russia's financial flexibility dramatically, setting the state for a host of economic difficulties. Ever since Russia took over Crimea in 2014, the Kremlin was prepared for further sanctions. In anticipation of this, Russia began to save with a large force majeure fund that grew to more than $600 billion in reserves by 2022. The huge reserves were designed to protect the economy from further Western sanctions. Russia had been doing this as part of a strategy to increase reserves in order to create a buffer against economic shocks and support financial stability, the World Bank said. The reserves were held in a mix of foreign currencies and gold as a cushion against international financial pressure on Russia. As a Bloomberg analysis explained, Putin stocked up on reserves as insurance against the expected economic consequences of their adventurous foreign policies. Yet the Western reaction to Russia's invasion of Ukraine was fast and furious. The Western countries froze Russia's reserves in concert, effectively preventing Moscow from getting its hands on the money it expected to help weather the economic slump. According to Reuters, the move was of an unprecedented scale and impact. The freezing of Russian central bank reserves has effectively crippled its ability to defend the ruble and bolster the economy. The freeze on these assets put Russia under severe financial constraints. According to the Wall Street Journal, the foreign reserves used in the failed battle to support its currency and financial markets totaled $546 billion as of March 27th. Here are the Financial Times. The coordinated freezing of reserves demonstrated strength and unity among Western nations that have so far failed to stop Russian aggression. Following intense sanctions from Western countries, Russia had gone to great lengths in order to avoid an economy crashing completely. Among the first sweeping steps taken was shutting its stock market. That decision was to keep investors from taking their money out of emerging markets en masse by making the market too unstable to exit easily. As per statements made by the Central Bank of Russia, the stock exchange had originally been shut for a few days, but this was prolonged to weeks because of the continued financial turmoil. According to the Central Bank of Russia, this measure is necessary for ensuring financial stability and protecting the interests of investors in an unprecedented economic environment. The longer closure highlighted how dire the situation had become and just how much the government was scrambling to mitigate the financial havoc set off by U.S. sanctions. After the sanctions, the Russian ruble was devalued in a matter of hours and dropped approximately 40%. Its relevance crumbled, compelling a dramatic interest rate hike by the Central Bank of Russia. Brent crude prices continue to rise. Port blockade could reduce UAE oil exports by much less than feared. Russia reassures Japan. Open Ukraine, live updates. Bank of Russia raises key interest rate from 9.5% to 20%. AIG changes name to AIG Private Client Group. Man suspected in NYC fire near UN killed by U.S. Marshals. Plane carrying 2 Americans freed by Venezuela lands in U.S. Highest yield savings account rates March 4th. Toy bomb finds critics in Afghanistan. The bipartisan goal on Russia is now focusing on economic pain. Russian businesses plead with Putin's war cabinet to end Ukraine war. Bot friends, presumably you remember the centrally located Claridge Hotel. As was stated by the Central Bank of Russia, this is a normal response to rising risks of ruble depreciation and the need for financial stability. The unprecedented step was meant to make borrowing more expensive and less attractive, in turn curbing spending and tempering rapidly rising inflation. However, those measures failed to prevent soaring inflation in Russia. The inflation rate peaked in March 2022 at 16.7%, much higher than the high U.S. inflation rate of 8.54%. These inflationary jolts clearly indicate the tremendous economic stress and general disruption created by the sanctions and associated financial strictures. The inflation rate of 16.7% in March is one of the highest we have ever seen. Rosstat, the Russian Federal State Statistics Service, revealed unveiling substantial price hikes, including essential goods and services. The major inflation that followed the Russian people raised the prices of goods and led to a significant increase in the cost of living and fueled even more economic instability among everyday Russians. Instant economic steps included the closure of the stock market, as well as a sharp increase in interest rates and rising inflation. The moves underlined how the measures that form part of sanctions aimed at targeting Russia's financial stability are severely hampering the ability of the burgeoning regime to maintain economic stability. The sanctions, which were coordinated, have frozen the foreign reserves of Russia and triggered a cascade of economic crises that the nation has struggled to manage. The boom and bust nature of Russia's economy has highlighted one of the biggest structural weaknesses, which long-term threatens economic collapse: its heavy dependence on oil and gas exports. This links 40% of the government's revenue and 60% of its total economy into your exports. The high reliance on commodity exports means that Russia is very sensitive to the global energy markets, as well as to military threats such as international sanctions on the Russian energy sector. Reports by the International Energy Agency, IEA, underscore just how important the energy industry is to Russia's economy. The IEA concludes that Russia's economic structure is highly reliant on oil and gas revenues from its extensive oil and gas reserves, leaving it vulnerable to external shocks in the energy market. This dependency restricts the diversification of the economy and at the same time exposes it to the adverse consequences of volatility in geopolitics and the market. We see the results of overly depending on natural resources in the extreme case of Russia, whose economic history during the last 40 years, Carr also explains. Struggling with a severe economic crisis in 2015 to 2016, caused by falling oil prices and international sanctions following the annexation of Crimea. Russia's GDP fell and the ruble collapsed severely during this time of trouble in a financial crisis. Historical data from Rosstat elucidates that in 2015, Russia's GDP contracted by 2.5%, while the inflation rate soared to 12.9%. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, observed that the economic regression during this epoch was exacerbated by Russia's limited economic diversification and its heavy reliance on energy exports. This financial downturn underscored Russia's susceptibility to external perturbations, particularly those impacting its primary revenue stream. Compounding these economic frailties is the pervasive malady of corruption and maladministration within Russian institutions. Endemic corruption has long plagued Russia, permeating all echelons of government and numerous economic sectors. This corruption not only hampers economic efficiency, but also erodes public trust and deters foreign investment. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index consistently rates Russia poorly, mirroring the extensive corruption across various sectors. The 2021 report articulates Russia's entrenched corruption remains a formidable barrier to economic development and governance. This pervasive corruption fosters an unstable business milieu, deterring both domestic and international investors from engaging in the Russian marketplace. The Carnegie Moscow Center also reports on the pernicious effects of corruption on governance and economic stability in Russia. Their analysis indicates that corruption and cronyism within Russian institutions severely curtail the country's economic potential and contribute to inefficient governance. Mismanagement and lack of transparency in state-owned enterprises, particularly within the energy sector, further exacerbate these dilemmas. The confluence of these factors, dependence on hydrocarbon exports, historical economic challenges, and endemic corruption, creates a precarious situation for Russia's long-term economic stability. The reliance on a solitary sector renders the economy vulnerable to external shocks, while corruption and governance issues undermine the efficiency and efficacy of economic policies. The crisis of 2015 to 2016 serves as a stark reminder of these vulnerabilities. During this period, the global decline in oil prices precipitated substantial revenue losses for the Russian government, exposing the fragility of an economy overly reliant on natural resources. The ensuing sanctions further compounded these issues, illustrating how geopolitical actions can have profound economic repercussions. Moreover, the pervasive corruption and mismanagement within Russian institutions continue to stifle economic growth and innovation. Investors, both foreign and domestic, remain wary of engaging in a market where corruption is rampant and governance is frail. This dearth of investment further impedes economic diversification and development, perpetuating the cycle of dependence on natural resources. Russia's long-term economic vulnerabilities stem from its heavy reliance on oil and gas exports, historical challenges from economic downturns, and systemic corruption and governance issues. These factors coalesce to create a fragile economic structure that is highly susceptible to external shocks and internal inefficiencies. Addressing these vulnerabilities necessitates comprehensive reforms aimed at diversifying the economy, enhancing governance, and curbing corruption. Absent such reforms, Russia's economic future remains uncertain and precarious. Over the past 2 decades, Vladimir Putin has meticulously consolidated power within Russia, particularly through state control of major energy companies such as Rosneft and Gazprom. These enterprises are not merely economic behemoths, they are pivotal instruments of political power. Putin's stratagem has been to ensure these companies are tightly controlled by the state, thereby maintaining a firm grip on one of the country's most vital sectors. Transparency International reports that this consolidation has enabled Putin to utilize these companies' revenues to fortify his regime. The state control over Rosneft and Gazprom ensures that the profits from these enterprises remain within the Kremlin's grasp, facilitating a network of patronage and control. This control has been instrumental in maintaining loyalty among the political elite and silencing opposition. The Carnegie Moscow Center adds that Putin's governance relies heavily on the revenues from these state-owned enterprises to sustain the political and economic order. The suppression of opposition is also a key component of this strategy. By controlling the energy sector, Putin can exert significant influence over the economy, which in turn stifles dissent and consolidates his power base. Following the imposition of international sanctions and the withdrawal of many foreign companies, Russia has increasingly turned to nationalization as a strategy to mitigate the economic fallout. The government has moved to supplant foreign businesses with state-owned equivalents, endeavoring to maintain economic activity and employment. The Financial Times reported that the Kremlin has aggressively pursued the nationalization of foreign enterprises, a move seen as essential to preserving jobs and stabilizing the economy amid sanctions. However, this approach entails significant challenges. Replicating the success of established foreign businesses is not straightforward, particularly given the intricacies of intellectual property and brand loyalty. Bloomberg's analysis underscores that while nationalization might serve as a temporary palliative, the long-term viability of these state-run enterprises remains dubious. The absence of competition and innovation could impede their success. The transition from foreign to state ownership often entails substantial disruption and inefficiency, further burdening the economy. The geopolitical tensions and subsequent invasion of Ukraine have precipitated a considerable exodus of foreign companies and financial institutions from Russia. This mass departure has had a profound impact on the Russian economy, precipitating capital flight, a loss of expertise, and diminished economic growth prospects. CNBC reported that major multinational corporations, ranging from retail behemoths to financial institutions, have exited Russia in response to the Ukraine invasion, citing both ethical and economic rationales. The departure of these companies has resulted in significant job losses and has created a vacuum that state-owned enterprises struggle to fill. The Financial Times elaborated on the broader economic ramifications, noting that the withdrawal of foreign investment has not only led to immediate economic contraction, but has also severely curtailed Russia's future growth potential. The loss of foreign expertise and technology transfer is irreplaceable, exposing the vulnerabilities in Russia's economic model, which has been excessively reliant on foreign investment in technology. In summation, Putin's consolidation of power through state control of key energy companies, the nationalization efforts in response to international sanctions, and the withdrawal of foreign investment have all profoundly impacted Russia's economy. The consolidation of power has allowed Putin to maintain control, but at the expense of economic efficiency and innovation. Nationalization has provided a temporary remedy to the withdrawal of foreign businesses, but poses significant long-term challenges. The exodus of foreign companies has not only created immediate economic issues, but also severely impeded Russia's future economic prospects. The coordinated actions of Western countries have exposed the frailties in Russia's economic and political systems. These geopolitical actions and domestic policies illustrate the complex interplay between political power and economic stability, highlighting the precarious position of Russia in the global economy. The future outlook for Russia's economy is increasingly bleak, with significant challenges looming on the horizon. Both the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank have forecasted a severe economic downturn for Russia, projecting a GDP contraction of around 11% in 2022. This contraction is among the most significant in recent history and signals a deep recession that could have lasting effects on the nation's economic landscape. According to the IMF, the Russian economy is expected to contract by 11% in 2022, marking a significant downturn due to the combined effects of international sanctions and reduced consumer confidence. This forecast paints a grim picture for Russia as the country grapples with the dual challenges of external economic pressure and internal instability. The World Bank echoes this sentiment, highlighting that the prolonged conflict and sustained sanctions will continue to suppress economic activity, with minimal growth anticipated in the coming years. These dismal projections suggest that Russia may face a prolonged period of economic stagnation, struggling to recover from the compounded effects of geopolitical isolation and internal mismanagement. The ripple effects of this economic downturn are expected to permeate all sectors of the Russian economy, from manufacturing to services. Consumer confidence has plummeted, investment has dried up, and the broader economic environment has become increasingly hostile to business operations. This environment creates a vicious cycle where economic challenges lead to reduced spending, which in turn further hampers economic growth and recovery. Another critical factor exacerbating Russia's economic challenges is the emigration of skilled professionals and intellectuals. The ongoing political and economic instability has driven many of Russia's brightest minds to seek opportunities abroad, weakening the country's competitive edge and stifling innovation. This brain drain is particularly troubling for a nation that relies on its human capital to drive technological and economic advancements. Reports by international labor organizations and human rights groups have documented this exodus extensively. According to the International Labor Organization, ILO, The emigration of skilled professionals from Russia has accelerated in recent years, particularly following the invasion of Ukraine. This loss of talent not only diminishes the country's immediate workforce, but also undermines its future economic growth prospects. The departure of these individuals creates a void that is difficult to fill, further compounding the economic difficulties faced by the nation. Human rights organizations have also highlighted the impact of repressive domestic policies on this trend. Human Rights Watch notes that the increasing authoritarianism and lack of opportunities have pushed many intellectuals and professionals to leave Russia, seeking a more stable and prosperous environment. The loss of these professionals is a significant blow to the country's economic vitality, as their expertise and innovation are critical for driving future growth and development. The sectors most impacted by this exodus of talent include technology, engineering, medicine, and academia. These fields are crucial for fostering a modern, competitive economy. Without a robust cadre of skilled professionals, Russia confronts significant obstacles in sustaining and advancing its technological and scientific prowess. This deficiency undermines its capacity to compete globally, leading to increased economic isolation and decline. One of the most pressing threats to Russia's economic stability is the potential collapse of its energy sector. Western nations have outlined strategies to drastically reduce and ultimately eliminate imports of Russian energy, a move that could shrink the Russian economy by an additional 20%. The energy sector has long served as the cornerstone of Russia's economy, and its decline would reverberate widely. The European Union has spearheaded these initiatives, aiming to diminish reliance on Russian energy as part of broader sanctions. According to a European Union report, the phased reduction of Russian coal, oil, and natural gas imports will significantly impact Russia's main revenue source, potentially causing a 20% economic contraction. This strategic maneuver seeks to weaken Russia's economic foundation and constrain its ability to fund military operations. The repercussions of diminished energy exports extend beyond the national level, affecting regional economies heavily reliant on oil and gas production. These areas may face acute economic distress, leading to heightened unemployment and social instability. Bloomberg notes that the downturn in energy exports will disproportionately affect regional economies, exacerbating economic disparities and fostering further instability. The loss of energy revenue, pivotal to Russia's economic structure, poses a formidable challenge to maintaining public services and social cohesion. The outlook for Russia's energy sector in the long term appears bleak, with global momentum shifting towards renewable energy sources. Nations worldwide are increasingly investing in renewables to reduce carbon footprints and bolster energy security. This shift threatens to diminish global demand for fossil fuels, further undermining Russia's economic prospects. As the world embraces sustainable energy solutions, Russia's reliance on traditional energy exports becomes increasingly unsustainable. The future prospects for Russia's economy are stark. With a projected 11% GDP contraction in 2022 and minimal growth anticipated in subsequent years, the nation confronts a protracted period of economic hardship. The departure of skilled professionals abroad further compromises recovery potential, while planned Western reductions in Russian energy imports jeopardize a primary revenue stream. These factors converge to paint a picture where Russia's economic stability remains tenuous at best, with uncertain prospects for a resurgence. The coordinated actions of Western powers to enforce sanctions and diminish dependence on Russian energy underscore the geopolitical dimensions of this economic crisis. As Russia contends with these challenges, the imperative for substantive economic reforms and diversification grows increasingly urgent. Absent significant changes, Russia risks enduring prolonged stagnation and decline, with profound implications for its populace and global stature. In this high-stakes geopolitical landscape, the decisions Russia makes will profoundly shape the outcome of its economic crisis and its position on the global stage in the years ahead. What are your thoughts? We invite you to share your opinions and predictions in the comments below. And while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe.